So, are sex and gender the same thing?
No.
Oh, I would agree, no.
No.
They're related, but not the same thing.
No, they are different.
No, of course not.
No.
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 I would say not.
No.
No.
What is gender?
Gender. I don't know. What is gender? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure how to put it into words.
Gender is more what you feel in your heart.
Gender is how someone defines themselves. It's what someone it's who someone feels like they are when they look in the mirror.
Gender is any one person's expression of who they are. It can be assigned with like a group identity or their own identity. It just depends on each person and how they represent themselves.
Gender, I feel like it's something that lives very much in your brain and in how you present yourself to the world. So I think it could be two different things depending on who you ask.
Yeah, gender's much more, I think, just emotional and psychological rather than physical.
What is sex?
Not sure about that one either.
I guess I think of that as like biological.
Sex is I think of sex as like a medical thing. But still that could have, that's not necessarily like a binary, right?
Sex is like what you're born with biologically.
Sex is, I think, a little bit more physical.
Sex is more of a, in comparison to gender, a biological, having more to do with your organs, I would say. It's a little wishy-washy, but that's where I would go.
Do you think that biological sex, can be socially constructed or is currently socially constructed?
Ooh, that's a great question.
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think it's very much biologically based, but I think people like to put sex in two different boxes, male, female.
I know that our ideas around, what genitalia we have are socially constructed.
I think in some ways it's socially constructed because the 2% of people that are intersex are often told that they must fit into one single gender.
At what point do we start policing the body?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Probably like pretty close after birth. Since not necessarily we should, but I think we start policing body before the kid is born. If you already know the gender, I think often it's a pink nursery or blue nursery.
I think that's something that's kind of done since you're born. I mean, if parents know they're expecting a boy, they have a blue room. They're given Legos instead of dolls.
Someone sees something that goes outside of that is perhaps a man who expresses themselves in a different way than most men are supposed to. That's kind of when people start policing.
I don't think there's anything too harmful with when a baby is born with a penis saying, this is a male baby, it has a penis. But if that kid grows up and says, I don't want this penis, or this penis doesn't make me a man, then that's when we have to start listening. So,
expectations that are totally based on one fact that you know about that child.
How many genders are there?
I think it's whatever you want it to be. You can't really put a number to it.
There are a lot, but I'm pretty sure I just found out about this really recently.
Where do we begin to count?
Yeah, I don't even know how you count gender.
I think Facebook will give us the answer soon enough.
Infinitely many.
So I think there are an unlimited amount of what you can identify as, is what I would say.
It's not that there are any number of genders, it's that everyone has their own.
I would say maybe as many as you want.
How many sexes are there?
I think it's somewhat of a spectrum. I think there are less choices.
I am not sure.
I don't know if you think of it just biologically, but then again, even with chromosomes, you can have
XXY, and then, you know, is that a whole nother sex, or is that male, or so I don't know.
Right. And like
even then it's kind of hard because like chromosomal wise there isn't even always a clear answer to sex.
I am inclined to say 2.
It's a poll depending on biology, I would say, because people can have different genitalia.
2.
I would go with 3.
that's also kind of hard too because there's 2 kind of obvious ones, but I think there's a lot of gray area in between.
Maybe an infinite amount. I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that.
I don't know if you can really quantify that.
How would you describe your gender identity?
My own. My gender. I am female.
I am female as I was at birth.
To me, it's just like girl, but like it's not the same for everyone. I don't want to like push anyone away with my love or my opinions.
My gender? My gender would be male, short hair, typical like boy clothing, like jeans, t-shirts.
I'm the kind of person who would like there not to be gender, really.
I describe myself as female, I guess.
My gender is male, and that was just like my gender growing up. That's how I define myself.
I think it's a hard one. I think I would identify my gender as probably what society has told me it is. I think I would have more issues with it if I felt like I was a different gender.
My expression is extremely fluid. Like when anyone asks to put on a spectrum, I always just like draw a little circle because it almost changes by the hour. Like sometimes I identify more as female or male.
I acknowledge that I'm a person with a vagina, and like being called a woman makes sense to me in that regard. So I identify with that.
Generally express my gender as a female with like the clothing I wear and the way I choose to fix my hair. And I think a lot of that was bred in me because like I come from like Japanese culture where like I never would have thought until I came to Tufts that like anything other than that was really something that would be acceptable and probably wouldn't even be acceptable in my family now. So if a stranger were to look at you, what gender do you think they would attribute?
I think they would attribute me to a female.
Why?
Just long hair, tend to wear purple, or body shape.
Almost always male, but a lot of people can tell me that my clothing is very feminine, and so a lot of people like from far away like sometimes think of a girl.
Female.
I was on the train and the conductor was standing behind me and said, "Young man." But male.
Probably female. Probably female.
Male.
Oh, they didn't think I was female, like hands down.
I assume people would think I'm a girl or a woman. I kind of want people just to see that you can express yourself however you want and still be whatever you want to call yourself.
I think they would attribute me as female, which is probably what I would call myself. But I don't know.
I think I'm a pretty obviously like female identifiable person.
I'm definitely female. Do you do anything in your everyday life that society would assume to be typical of a gender other than the one you identify with?
I'm an engineer.
That oh, you're a female engineer. I've gotten, how are you going to take care of your kids when you're older? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's the same as any female working a full-time job. I'm just in the more math and science field.
So that's probably the best example because I deal with that on a daily basis.
I really like to go to the gym, and I like to lift weights, which can be like masculine, I guess.
Well, I guess males typically aren't expected to go into education, and I currently work at a preschool, and I work at another elementary school. I'm also a child development major.
Since I kind of go all along the gender spectrum, I would say no. I just try not to be extremely masculine or extremely feminine because I think that reinforces the binary.
I just don't. I don't really attach genders to like activities, you know.
I don't know. That's a hard one.
Like a lot of people think that practicing veganism is a feminine thing.
I think it's harder for a girl to do that than it is, or a girl to do that than it is a boy, because there are a lot of things that I do on a daily basis that are like tomboy-y, which would be okay as a girl, but maybe not if it was switched.
I don't know, even saying it seems weird because I don't think of myself as just having this non-stereotypical personality trait. It's just, it's a dislike.
So do you think it's all about the binary, or is there some leeway?
I think there is for sure leeway. And I don't know, I think like it's not something that I understand very well, but as long as people are like open to understanding what other people feel about it, then like it's fine to learn as you go along.
I think there's a lot of leeway. I don't really buy into the idea of there being a binary. I think that it's harmful and it excludes a lot of people.
But it's also really complicated because I think it's hard in that it's hard for 1,000 reasons that we don't look at parents as parents, we look at parents as mom and dad, and you can have 2 moms or 2 dads, but it's still like very complicated because one is providing one aspect of genetic information, is one is providing the other.
Just when I see someone, like I'm gonna like think like boy or girl, like in my subconscious, and like then after that I can start like thinking like, okay, well it could be either, like it doesn't matter, like it doesn't, like they could be like a completely different side of the spectrum, or maybe it's not even a spectrum, and I can think all those things, but instinctually I think it will be about the binary.
I feel like anything that can be put on a binary is also just a spectrum, though.
I think there's some leeway.
Do you think we'll ever start looking at the world in less of a binary?
I don't think it'd be in my lifetime.
I hope so.
It's a certain dichotomy that you're like putting on all ideas. Like certain relations have to be either binaries or spectrums. But if you want something to be a spectrum, then what you sacrifice is you have to still be able to say, if it's a spectrum between masculine and feminine, then every person you have to be able to say which one's more masculine and which one's more feminine. Because that's what the line is.
I think one, it's gonna be hard to get past the binaries just because our brains are programmed to think that way in a lot of fashions, which is unfortunate, but it's also something that we can actively work against.
I think now, in like the past few years, and like I think progressing now, there's gonna be less of a gender binary. I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with because it's something that's like been set in stone for so long, and people are trying to like break the bounds. So I think there is like possibility for change in that.
I think we will always see it as like one end of the binary here, the other end, and I think we're getting more comfortable with in between, but I don't think dismantling the binary completely is going to happen in the near future. I think we're always going to be more comfortable starting at the binary and then kind of moving along between the 2 ends.
Yeah, I feel like everything is kind of coming to a point where people are realizing that it's not just one way or the other, and people are having to like figure that out.
Unfortunately, with the way I see politically and socially our culture moving, I don't know if it'll happen for a while, but I would like to think that someday it's not so black and white.
I think the general public is starting to become more open-minded about and have conversations about things that otherwise, that up until now we just didn't talk about or acknowledge.